Let's go out, we'll take no prisoners. Lonely love, gotta leave it behind. We look like $1 million. Every time they look at us, we'll blow their mind.
Hi, I'm Avi Federgreen, and welcome back to Unleashed, an indie guide to filmmaking. I'm Avi Federgreen, and today we have a really close friend of mine, filmmaker, post-production editor, specialist, writer. He's everything. Programmer for Toronto After Dark. I'd like you to meet my friend Justin McConnell. Welcome, Justin.
Hey everybody, I'm Justin McConnell. He's introduced most of the things I do, so I'm not going to go on that kind of spiel. I'm sure it'll come up in conversation. But this is a visual podcast too, right? Like you're going to have video there. Yes. So I want to quickly explain that if you see me wincing or if I have to jump up and run to the bathroom, it's because I'm going through some kidney problems right now. And I've been to the hospital a bunch this last week, which is why I've got the mark on my nose, because I've been wearing an N95 mask constantly for hours on end in a hospital, and it fucked up the top of my nose. So if anybody's like, what's wrong with him? I'm in pain. I'm just prefacing the podcast with that.
Well, thanks for your transparency, Justin. And we all hope that this resolves itself very soon.
Well, we'll see.
So, Justin, why don't we go back in time to a long time ago when you were first a bit of a musician, in the early days, and why don't we talk about the early days of you being involved in music and film and music videos, etc.?
Sure. I mean, if you want to go way back, like in high school is where I kind of got the bug. I was, or even younger. I was very, very into movies. My dad is really what got me into it because I was sick a lot as a kid. So he would rent me like all the stuff my mom didn't want me to see. He would sort of sneak to me while I was sick at home. He's like, oh, you want to watch Alien? Great. Oh, you can handle Alien. Well, here's Dario Argento's Creepers, which is phenomenal. That movie messed me up. I think I was 12 or 13 when I saw that. And, yeah, you don't go back from seeing like, I don't know, a monkey with a straight razor kill people. Anyway, so I got really, really interested in movies when I was in like young in high school. So I started making my own short films with like first a borrowed 8mm video camera, and then I saved up some summer job money and bought like a digital 8 camera. So by the time I'd left high school, I'd made a bunch of like mini documentaries for class presentations, some of them which were well received, and some of them were just an excuse for me to cut together a reel of 15 minutes of brutal violence and show it to my teacher to their I guess disappointment. And I'd made a couple short films, and my own first feature film I actually shot while in high school as well. And I put together a local student film festival to show that, and a bunch of other students' films while in high school. I guess technically I started my hometown's film festival, although it died after me and then was resurrected. So and then I moved to Toronto, and I went to York University. Dropped out after 4 months because of a massive TA strike, taking most of the time that I should have been in class. I was not in class because of a strike. So I left and I took my scholarship money and I went to Trebas. And at Trebas, I took post-production because I figured it was more practical. And that's what kind of led me on a path to, I was working for a company called Creative Forces I got a job there doing TV spots for music artists like Seal or Billy Talent or whatever, those commercials that used to always play on Much Music, or they'd be on the billboard downtown I cut together a lot of those. And I was in one of them. I was in Big Shiny Tunes 8's commercial. They typecast me as a fat guy eating a burger in a food fight. But anyway, long story short, that was one path. I was really like getting better and better at post-production and learning that side of things. And then the other path would be that I was going out to like metal concerts and stuff with the business card and saying, "Hey, I make music videos. Hey, I make music videos." And then I ended up with enough small clients that I started directing music videos that would get played on Much Music and stuff like that, and met a bunch of people that way. Started like, I think in 2004, I started shooting my first feature documentary, Working Class Rock Star, and that took me on the road with bands. And then in 2000, that's I think the same year was when we started my band, our band, Heavily Medicated, and we played a bunch of shows in Toronto and got to open for like Strapping Young Lad, which is Devin Townsend's band, and a bunch of other stuff. That band lasted a couple years. I've been doing solo music, all sort of like in there as well. But it was just a two-pronged approach, and I just started self-financing a bunch of movies, and at a certain point other people started paying for some of them, and the post-production business kept building. And at this point, I make a pretty good living on the post-production side, like pretty good. Just doing like Blu-ray, 4K, DVD authoring, trailer editing, deliverables, you name it. I'm sort of a one-stop shop for a lot of things. And the movies are great. I would love to make more movies all the time, but they don't pay the bills, and they take years to put together, and a lot of them you put in so much time, and I've got projects going on 10, 11 years that still aren't to screen. I've got a drawer of 20 scripts that aren't to screen, and I kind of like have to resign myself to just like, well, I'm doing quite well on the business side of things. That keeps me going, so I can reinvest in myself. And so I'm right now I'm focusing on like a smaller project that I'm kind of paying for a lot of it myself, just so that I can get it done, sort of almost in the spare time, because I still have to keep myself afloat too.
But I mean, look, you've had really great success with a lot of your films. And when I met you during Fan Expo a number of years ago,
2012,
had far too many drinks together, and next thing you know, not too long after, we were, putting together a movie, which was called Life Changer.
It was 5 years later. Yep.
Yeah, 5 years later.
Yep.
And but before that, you did a doc, Skull World, which
2 docs, but yes, Skull World was the second one for sure.
And IndieCan released that, and it did quite well. And then we put together, you wrote and directed Life Changer, which you traveled literally around the world, including I went to a bunch of places with you as well, including Busan, South Korea, and Fright Fest in London, and so on and so forth. So you've had great success in film, whether it be doc or narrative. And I know, in talking with you ongoing, that there's a few other projects that,
Well, I mean, success is like a relative term, right? Like you tend to redefine it for yourself every, day. And to me, success isn't like, oh, my films have played all over the place and I've got to travel. I mean, that stuff is all great. I'm not denigrating that at all. But to me, success is just being happy with the work, and like being able to continue to work and not feel like I'm grinding, not feel like every day is just a slog to get through. And if I feel like that, that's success to me. And it isn't, these aren't big movies, right? These aren't like, I haven't done 2,000 screens with anything, and like, I'm not up for the next Marvel thing, and I don't know if I ever really care to be. Like, I've never really been aiming for that specifically. I just want to make films that I'm with and tell stories I'm happy with, and I've come to the realization that like I'm just not really a mercenary. Like, I don't want to do movies of the week and just like TV episodes. And that, again, that's not to take away from people who do that at all, because that's their job. They absolutely, they're happy doing that. That's great. It's just not, I feel like I would be very unhappy spending a year of my life on a project I'm not that interested in, or I'm just not, it's just a day job to me. I've already got a day job, and it's one that's on my terms, and I'd rather.
All your movies have been on your terms up to this point too.
Yeah, well, I mean, mostly. I mean, like with Life Changer, for example, absolutely, I had a lot of creative control on that, but I really welcomed the kind of collective teamwork aspect of that one, because we had obviously our investors on it, we had the Raven Banner guys on it, we had Avi, you producing it. There was a lot of voices with that one, and I was sort of welcoming that process more than in my past stuff, because the past stuff was very much kind of like Broken Mile and The Collapsed, and the older documentaries were very much mostly just me in terms of the creative, and in terms of the final cut and all that sort of thing. With Life Changer, I took a lot more notes. Right. And some of those I regret, but for the most part, for the most part, I really like that process. I really like that collaboration, and
Well, and even after that, you did Clapboard Jungle, which
yeah.
to me is an amazing film that really speaks to the making indie films and the challenges that one faces during that. And
Almost, I did that before it technically because I started shooting that
sure.
in
Yeah,
2015. That
yeah,
was another one of those. All my documentaries so far have been like, what can I afford? Okay, all right, well, we'll do that, and I'll just gradually shoot it piecemeal out of my own pocket over many, many years,
right,
and then by the end of it, I'll have a film, and that's what Clapboard Jungle was for me.
right.
Was just like another. Okay, well, I'll put all the effort I can into it, but it's like a side project, and
Right.
then it became very well received, but it took years to get there.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, no, for sure.
Mhm.
So why don't we talk about, you know, the industry where, and films from where it's come from to where it is today, and what your thoughts are on the challenges that exist now, and as opposed to the challenges that you faced back in the day, I guess you could say,
Sure.
especially in genre. Like, how do you feel about where things are now and the films that are being made in the genre versus what was being made previously by people like Cronenberg or whoever, and now?
Uh, it's a really tough question. The reason it's a tough question is because the film business reinvents itself, it seems, every week.
Right.
And especially now with the way technology is moving, we got AI knocking on the door of the business, and all the streamers kind of conglomerated everything in together. And the films that are getting made are either incredibly high budget or incredibly low budget. And that middle zone is those movies happen, but when they do happen, it's like an exception and not the rule. And there's always a chance that those mid-budget movies, they break out, but a lot of them never make their money back.
Yeah.
So but I feel like back in, I don't want to call them the glory days but when I was growing up, the movies that I idolized and the filmmakers that I idolized, and like I loved the John Carpenters and the Wes Cravens and stuff. That was a whole other era, and to me that almost feels like it's not it's a whole other business and a whole other form of that art, because you'd have people like Sid Sheinberg who would go to like John Carpenter and Wes Craven and be like, well, I'm going to make 4 movies, 2 each, do whatever the fuck you want, I don't care. And he'd be like, here's 2 million a movie, just turn in the movie, and you get weird stuff like The People Under the Stairs and Serpent in the Rainbow and Shocker and what's the other Wes Craven? Anyway, those 4 like directors just being able to go, oh, I've got any money I want to, and I can make anything I want. Well, shit, I'm just gonna do something wild, and that still does happen. But the people who are given those opportunities are very few and far between. You get people like Zach Kreger and Ari Aster. People who've really proven themselves with like a first film that really broke out, and then the company like A24 will go to them and do the same thing. Here's the money, do whatever you want.
Right.
That's such a very small infinitesimal like part of the genre and the business at this point, where a director can just like spread their wings and do, any weird idea in their head. Once you have a hit like that, you can usually get away with that. But then you could also end up in the Richard Kelly sort of pocket where he makes Donnie Darko, and then they say do whatever you want, and then he makes Southland Tales. And Southland Tales was a massive like critical bomb, and really burned him for a while. But I personally, it's a movie I love,
Mm.
because it's so weird and so unique, whatever. But the actual general audience might not be ready for that. But I guess what I'm trying to drive at is that sort of like maverick kind of maverick indie approach with big money doesn't really hit most filmmakers these days. Most filmmakers are either, if you want to really take a swing and make something crazy, you're making it for like very, very, very little money nowadays, and maybe almost no money. You're just pulling like something like Skinamarink, for example, was made for like 15 grand or 20 grand or something like that, and it really blew up. But it was very much someone going, screw it, I'm just going to make something different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another one like In a Violent Nature is a movie where, yeah, obviously Shudder put in money early on, but it was very much like a low budget experiment in a way, and they had no idea it was going to work. They had no idea it was going to blow up, and then it did, and now there's a sequel being shot in like 3 weeks or whatever. They're just starting to shoot.
Right.
Those big like swings that you either got to go that direction or you need to package a big movie with big cast and like get it across the finish line, and then it's actually got a hit, which is what we've been trying to do with Mark of Kane. We got a great director on board, somebody with a real track record and who can get a cast, but it's still at that budget level where it's hard to get people to take risks.
Right.
Even though it doesn't seem like a risk on a story level or on a team level, and the casting, we could attract some really solid actors for these characters. It's a risk because it's hard to recoup that zone, that like $5 to $7 million budget zone is really hard to recoup these days,
Right.
unless you're like you've got Blumhouse behind you, who've already got the infrastructure and the deal with Universal and the theatrical output deals and all that sort of thing. It's tough. It's tough as an indie to bring that kind of money back. So I think the change really is that if you're not, you have to constantly be reinventing yourself and being on your toes. And adapting to what the business is and where it's going, instead of like really focusing on what the business was and will never be again.
Mhm.
And I think it took me a while to kind of wrap my head around the concept that like the business that I kind of dreamed of working in, I've never worked in it. It's
Right.
I have no experience with that kind of like. So in a way, back then it was harder to get that break because there were fewer opportunities to do so, because you had to know people more. So the gear was more expensive, the films were more expensive to make because again, the gear is more expensive. You're shooting on film. You need to have a deal with a distributor usually ahead of time, and it very much you're working your way up from lower positions on sets and getting your step in the door and then eventually directing. Maybe you go the Roger Corman route and you work a bunch of their productions, and then they hand you a low budget thing, and that brings you. A lot of directors came up through the Roger Corman route. A lot of directors came up through Lloyd Kaufman and Troma.
Mhm.
That kind of route sort of exists, but it's in a different kind of way, because nowadays you're making like zero budget movies with digital gear or an iPhone or like DSLR, whatever. Like the gear doesn't necessarily matter, but you're just trying to make something that stands out from a pack of thousands more movies than were being released back then.
Right.
I feel like I'm rambling at this point, but I guess what I'm ultimately trying to get across is that I don't know what the fuck is happening. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, and I don't think anybody knows what the fuck they're doing these days. You kind of just have to try and predict the trend, try and get ahead of it, or make your own trend, because ultimately, uh, something could happen next week. Some new technology gets announced. Some new, the bottom will fall out of the industry one way or another. The money won't be there anymore in the way it used to be, and then you got to go, okay, well now how do I make something? And then the following week something new will happen.
Right.
So I honestly these days don't really have a clue outside of I've just got to make something. I've just got to make something the way I know how to make it, how to get it across the finish line, and let the chips fall where they may be, and hope people respond to it. Because ultimately, like, you could put your heart and soul and years of work into something, and it just sits there and it gets lost in a sea of 10,000 other releases that year. Uh, so you just gotta keep getting up at the bat and swinging. And I don't know what else to talk about in terms of the actual genre, like the genre itself. Like,
Well, I mean, you're a programmer, right, for Toronto
yeah,
Arc,
yeah, and I see a lot of movies,
a
obviously.
lot of movies through that forum and other forums, and you have a
Yeah.
lot of relationships with indie filmmakers all over the world. And what are you seeing? What kind of films are you seeing today that you weren't seeing 10 years ago or whatever?
Um, I mean, if anything's changed, it's that people are experimenting more.
Right.
because the tech is so cheap,
Right.
and because these stranger, wilder, experiments with format. Um, there was a film that just played Fantasia called Buffet Infinity, which blew my bloody mind. And I've talked to other people who've watched it, and some of them got it, some of them didn't. The whole movie is structured around a series of local commercials for local businesses, and then and the evolution of each of it's just commercials. The whole movie is just a series of commercials, really. But as you watch these commercials, it tells a existential horror story about this evil sort of overtaking this town slowly and slowly as these commercials morph into addressing local concerns and competing with other businesses and things like that. And to me, it's very much made in the language of like Tim and Eric's Awesome Show from Adult Swim, and like Racer Trash, which was like an underground editing experimental movement of online screens that was happening in the early part of the pandemic. And just like I don't know, everything is terrible. Like all this very internet younger alt comedy influence stuff. But the way it's structured and put together, and it is actually really unsettling and actually very horrifying, but done with this tongue in its cheek, very broad. If you grew up in the 80s or in the 90s, you know what these commercials are. You've seen this like it's so well observed in terms of that. And so there's more of this sort of experimental kind of like non-traditional films, things where you watch it and you go, okay, I see where they're coming from. I've never seen another movie like that before. There's a lot more of that sort of just people taking the form and manipulating it, and if some people don't get it, it's almost like too bad. They'll get it in 10 years when there's more stuff that's come out that's like that, and people have the language to be able to understand it. I'm also seeing just people always hop on trends. They always have. There was the zombie boom, a decade ago, and there was a big, because all the mainstream horror for a period of time was very much like some people move into a house and scary things happen in the house, and it's a supernatural horror movie, and that's all that's getting made. So there's always pockets of films that get like, okay, well, they see that that's what's popular, so a bunch of indie filmmakers start making those movies. But by the time those movies are done on the indie level, it's no longer popular on the mainstream level. So you've lost the trend. You can't really chase that sort of trend. But realistically, I thought if I've noticed anything, it's just that there's always more and more films every year. There's always more stuff being made because and for less resources, but still high quality. But there's the other side of that. When there's more and more of these films being made, even if they're of decent quality, a lot of them never see a release. That I'll see a screener and that movie will never come out. It'll never get bought, or it'll get released, but it'll be like self-released in a really tiny way on one of those really small sort of like not even Tubi, like a streaming platform that probably nobody watches kind of thing, but you're pushing people to it like because it's a proprietary thing that your friends made or what. There's just endless amounts of content, and and I say content because it's not just films, right? You're competing with streamers online. You're competing with video game let's plays. You're competing with TikTok. You're competing with like short form content, vertical content.
Right.
Um, Film, it's a much more crowded media landscape now. So people are making movies. Lots of people are making movies. But those movies as well are sort of like starting to flirt with these other mediums too, adapting into there's a lot of like movies about influencers these days. I'm watching screeners of, a lot of movies about screen life stuff like we're doing right now, talking on Zoom. What's movies built around, an entire movie built around what people are seeing through their computer screen and stuff like that because they're cheap to make. It's like found footage. It's the same sort of idea. Those movies are, you can pull that off with very limited resources. But ultimately, those are just trends. I don't see a huge difference between 10 years ago and now in terms of the types of genre films that are being made. I just see a lot more people, because the traditional funding avenues aren't as prevalent as they were, are just taking big swings with less money.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the approach I think a lot of people are taking.
Yeah, and I mean in Canada, genre is not necessarily it's with some of the funders it's a four-letter word, right? So um although this year it was like four to
Yeah,
six.
I think they're warming up to it. It's because it does well financially and they want to make some money back. Is part of the reason
Oh,
probably. But but that being said, it's not like Telefilm's going to go out and frequently fund like a really raw slasher movie or something. It's usually something, that term elevated, that is overplayed by now, but it's usually something that's more like, well, the demon is a metaphor for the trauma of ancient family grief or whatever. It's usually something very much metaphorical and has another, the stuff that the funders fund has another kind of it'll play well as
it's
well as an art.
elevated. It's not really horror.
Oh
It's
no, it's still horror. It's just horror with
with
where you,
very little blood
yeah,
or
you could play it
really.
for an art house crowd and they'd be cool with it. But that being said, Telefilm also puts stuff into like Deathstalker and whatnot, right? So it's it really depends on um I guess who's approaching them and what the ask is and how much of the percentage of the budget it is and what program it is and stuff. So yeah, again, it's anybody's guess.
Right. And so I want to talk a bit about, where do your ideas come from? Like you're a writer, all the movies that you've shot, you've also written and directed. Uh, I'm interested to hear, because you and I have never talked about this actually, but where do these ideas come from and how easily do they come to you? And how easy is it for you once they come to you to get it on the page?
Um, I mean, where does air come from? There's
Well, no, but you know what I mean.
yeah,
Like,
no, I know. It's just,
are you watching TV and an idea comes on, or
I
you're
mean,
watching
it could be
an idea?
literally anything. I could be walking my dog and something just hit there. I don't know if it was Douglas Adams. I think it was Douglas Adams in the Hitchhiker's Guide novels, talking about the seeds of ideas are just these protons floating through space, and the lucky ones are able to, they get hit by this. I'm paraphrasing this because it's been 20 years since I've read those books, but they get hit with this seed of inspiration and they can't let it go. I it's not like I ever sit and I actively like sometimes I'll brainstorm, but that's usually if I'm working with a writing partner and we're like, well, let's make a project and we what do that's a more of a conversation. But in terms of just ideas that I can't let go of and I want and then I decide I want to make, I don't know. I get a billion ideas a day coming at me in one way or another, and a lot of them are fleeting. A lot of them are just like, yeah, that would make a fun short film, or that's a cool idea, and then I just let them go. But I do, I keep a notepad and I'll write if I really like something and I don't want to forget it, I'll write it down, and then if I revisit it later and it's still something that's like, hey, that's kind of cool, then I'll explore it further. But it's just organic. I mean, ultimately. I think all writing comes from that aspect, unless it's an assignment, where somebody has tasked you. Okay, well, we've got the rights to this. Can you adapt? That's a different thing. In terms of original ideas, sometimes they germinate for decades. Sometimes the seed of something will be in your past work, and you go, okay, I'd like to explore that theme further. Or it's really I couldn't. There's no hard and fast kind of like process I go through to generate an idea because it doesn't really work that way. It's really more just you live your life and then these things come to you, these thoughts come to you. I've always got an internal dialogue running for not just ideas, but I'm a classic overthinker, so I an overjudger of myself. So I'm constantly just you know running thought patterns in my mind, and sometimes ideas come out of those, and whether they're good or not is up to the audience when it eventually gets made, or the script, whoever's reading the script. But if I like an idea enough, if it's something that speaks to me enough that I can't forget it, or it's an idea that I like it, and then I realize, oh, I have a way to execute this. I can actually make this one. Then I'll develop it further and write down. At first, I'll start with like bullet point form as things come to me, but I generally let it gestate. It's like the idea of putting a script in a drawer. Well, even earlier than that, you got your idea. Okay, cool. I'll think about it in the subconscious kind of way for a while. I'll let it work itself out for a bit. And then once I'm able to start, I've got enough bullet points on a page, that's when I'll really start brainstorming the structure of it and the characters. I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons since high school, so my approach to character is very similar to the approach to creating a Dungeons and Dragons character, or a role playing game character. In that I'll make, once I know what I want to do and I kind of have a loose idea who the characters are, I'll make massive character backstories. So at least I know who these people are and where they came from. So that when I approach the writing of the actual project overall, it's not just, well, what would I do in this situation? It's, given this character's background and what they've been through, what would this character do in this situation? And then the story usually comes from that organic process of like, okay, yeah, no, they would do this, they would do this, they would do this. This is how they would react to this event. Would they even bother trying this? Well, it's always sort of like an internal dialogue between fake people that I made up in my own head, Right. And once the actual script is written, it's about reading it out loud, either with other people or with yourself, and like making sure the dialogue and everything sort of flows. And then it's just again, a revision process of putting it away and letting time pass for you to look at it with fresh eyes, and letting other people read it and give you notes. And it's a long process. At least to me, it should be. It should always be. You shouldn't pump something out and then immediately shoot it, because that's where you run into big problems.
And we know, and I mean, I've preached this for years, is that, anybody can shoot a movie now with the digital age, and many filmmakers don't spend enough time on script. That script is king. And if you can't make a good script out of a bad idea, right? So it's about, you got to really work that script until it's, not only you, even though you think it's really good, maybe other people read it and go, what the heck is this? Right?
Yeah.
I've been in those cases where I get approached by, and I'm sure I know you have as well. We get approached by friends or whatever, and they got a great idea, or even a stranger for that matter. And they say, this script has won numerous awards at festivals, script writing contests, and all this other stuff. And then you read it, and it has more holes than Swiss cheese, right?
Sure, but I would say I would give them a bit of a benefit of a doubt there, and same with anybody reading my stuff, is like, there's context that is on the page, but people may not actually clue into. So when I'm reading a script by someone else, I usually like to have a conversation with that person and ask them to clarify certain things, because I might be entirely missing. The same thing's happening with the project I'm working on now. I've got one of the unit directors just sent me a block of notes last night, and I'm reading through it going, yeah, I don't think he picked up on a lot of stuff. As helpful as some of the notes are, some of them are like, how did he get that from that? And then you've got to go back into your own writing and go, okay, well, how is this unclear? Is this actually on the page, or is this in my head and then I wrote it out, and whatever is in my head didn't quite translate to the reader, or was the reader distracted, or because it's a form of communication on page, because and even when you're in a conversation with somebody, they may misunderstand your words or your intention behind your words. You kind of, especially when it comes to getting notes or giving notes, you kind of need to make sure that you have clarity as to what the scene is actually trying to say, as opposed to what your interpretation of the scene is, or someone else's interpretation of the scene is, because they're not inside your head and you're not inside their head. And you can even pull it back to emails, right? You send somebody an email detailing clear instructions to someone, or explaining a situation to someone, and the person who reads that email is going to read the tone of it, and they may not read it correctly. They may think that the tone is angry, or defensive or apologetic, or the reader brings to what they're reading whatever their mood is of the day, whatever their life experience was before they read the thing, and whatever their psychological mix-up is, and every experience, like all their base knowledge. They may not understand the references you're making, and vice versa. They don't have your life experience. They haven't read the books you've read. They haven't watched the stuff you've watched, or researched the history you've researched. And when you're writing a script and you're giving it to someone else to read, you're kind of putting the faith that the other person reading it knows where these thoughts are coming from. And if it's not on the page and not explained clearly, then you have a communication breakdown. And at that point, it's like the script could be incredible, but if the people reading it can't understand what it's going to look like and how it's going to be delivered on, you have that sort of misinterpretation of the material. So that's why it's good to always um, make notes like an actual conversation, question and answer, question and answer, question, because that gets to the key, the heart of what the problems are in the script.
Right.
I think. And so it's very much, it's just an ongoing process. Like the script is never done. Even when you're in editing, the script is still being worked on technically, because what is editing if not writing using the medium of piecing together the chunks of what you actually shot on set, right? The movie's made 3 times, when it's being written, when it's being shot, and when it's being edited. So because it's always a conversation, your script is never going to be perfect, and you can always improve it in one way or another.
Right. And in some cases, while you're editing it, you realize that something wasn't hitting home or making sense or
Reshoot.
do a reshoot or shoot extra footage, or maybe the storyline gets, thrown around a little bit. So, scene 15 may not necessarily in the final movie be scene 15. It might be further down. It might be brought forward, whatever the case may be.
Yep.
I'm always fascinated by where these ideas come from and germinate, and because I've read tons of your stuff. We've made a couple projects together. We're developing some other stuff, and the stuff that you're creating, I mean, would never even cross my mind. Which is, I mean, I love that, because as you said earlier, and I think I would say this is true for me, different is the best. Like, not being the same old, same old. Like, we kill 15 people in 90 minutes, and there's lots of blood splatter all over the place, and there's no true story arc for each of the characters. And we've seen this 1,000 times in other movies before and things like that, which
Yeah.
is some of the best horror that I've ever seen. And I'm not one to go out and watch a ton of horror, but the days of John Carpenter and films made in those days
Yeah.
are some of the best films I've ever seen in the genre.
Well, I think part of that is very much like those movies were influenced by what came before, but they weren't influenced by horror movies that came before. And like John Carpenter was influenced by like John Ford westerns and classic sci-fi and stuff, but he's not there. I find there's a disconnect, right? Because I was wired like this too, and I still am to a degree, but I grew up absorbing these legendary horror filmmakers. So when I was younger, but still, and started making stuff, I was like, oh, I got to make something that feels like a Sam Raimi movie, or like, you're influenced by other horror filmmakers. And I think you got to be influenced by the core story itself, and everything else that comes out of that. You don't want to mimic a style and like this will be popular because it feels like a Wes Craven movie. This will be popular because it feels like a John Carpenter movie. It's the movie John Carpenter would have made if he could, but I'm the one making it now. That kind of thought process, I don't think it just makes a cover song. Like, to use a music analogy, you're making a cover song at that point. I think the much more important approach, or more interesting approach, is to take everything that makes you as a person and generate a story that you'd want to see on screen, and not worry at all where the influences came from. Like, if stylistically your movie ends up looking like John Carpenter, it's because you've decided that's the best way to, tell the story. I don't think John Carpenter was like, when he made, say, Assault on Precinct 13 before he made Halloween. That's very much like influenced by Rio Bravo, right? Which is an old Western, a very good Western, a siege movie. And he took a lot of visual cues from Rio Bravo, but that story is not Rio Bravo. And the way that it's executed is not really Rio Bravo. That's John Carpenter's story. He wasn't going, I'm going to make a remake of Rio Bravo. He went, I'm going to make this story. And I can kind of see what inspired me, because I really loved Rio Bravo, but I'm not making another version of Rio Bravo. I think you kind of, the best horror to me is stuff that understands everything that came before and has that language, and like understands where all the roots are, but then grows a brand new fucking tree.
Right.
I think is the way I would phrase that. Stop trying to create the same tree, stop or the same thing, which people do all the time. Really, is just like this is a '80s throwback. There's like this entire so many movies I get seen made where it's just like this is an '80s style pastiche. It feels just like the movies did in the '80s, and you're like, well, no, it feels a bit like a representation of what the '80s could have been through the eyes of someone who never grew up in the '80s, but understands that neon colors and grain and film damage and '80s style clothing will give the movie the aesthetic of that. But it's not really like the '80s. It's just the movie representation of the '80s as you've seen through a bunch of other movies that were trying to ape the '80s aesthetic, right? AI has this issue too, where they call it they talk about model collapse, where basically, and I don't want to get talking about AI. I fucking hate AI, but it self cannibalizes itself. So over time, gradually, bit by bit, it's training itself on its own data, which was previously trained on its own data until it's not creating anything new at all. It's just like everything starts looking the same, and the part of that happens when you're making movies too, if all you're trying to do is create something that has a vibe of something because the other people have done that and it was popular. So um there's the other side of the coin too, where someone like Steve Kostansky makes Psycho Gorman, which is so hyper specific, or Frankie Frico is probably a better example. It's so hyper specific about one key aspect, clearly made by somebody of an era of like '90s full moon direct to video mini creature features, and this is clearly made by someone who like loved that stuff, understood all the intricacies of it, probably watched the full moon video zones after the end credits of all of those VHS tapes, because like they were sort of pioneers with special features, because when you got a VHS of a full moon movie, when the movie ended, there was a little making of documentary at the very end of the movie on a VHS tape, which is something that like that's pretty pioneering for its time. But what I'm trying to get at is that isn't a pastiche necessarily. That's like somebody going, okay, I'm going to take this very, very specific era of stuff, and then I'm going to adapt in the same era, the feeling of those direct to Cinemax late night softcore, romantic dramas, and I'm going to mash those two ideas together and create this unique thing. That's different to me, because that's very, very, very informed by the actual stuff from that time, as opposed to like, something that has like a loose kind of feel because they watched Stranger Things and went, well, that's what the '80s was like. I don't know. I've gone on a tangent, so I'll stop talking. But I just think you got to make something that speaks to your personality and your truth and your everything that makes you as a person. You got to put it up on the screen, like to some degree, and you'll find an audience that has a sort of like a similar kind of understanding of the world, and then hopefully it branches out beyond that, because the authenticity of it is what speaks to people, not the vibe of it.
Toronto Mike, I think you wanted to chime in with a couple of questions or comments.
Yes, fascinating conversation, Avi, with Justin McConnell. And I took a note here. I've been taking notes throughout. I'm just going to read my notes here. Justin earlier said he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing.
Yep.
And nobody knows what they're doing.
Yep.
So my question is, if I'm a young aspiring filmmaker, what the fuck is the point of going to, like, I don't know, school? Like you went to York and Trebas and everything. Like, what's the point of getting a filmmaking education when nobody knows what the fuck they're doing?
It's a really good question. I'm not even sure at this point, because now, okay, so film school for me was good for two things in particular. One of them was, and again, this was over 20 years ago, so the business has changed so much. What I learned in film school wouldn't apply to anything now anyway. But the two things that I got out of film school that I found to be invaluable was, one, an early network of people, like people I could collaborate with and create stuff with, and who had gear and who you meet them in your classes, and you've sort of trained with them, and you get the feeling of who's actually really good and passionate and who isn't, who's just coasting through. And then you can have a little crew you can put together and make stuff with, and that's pretty valuable for film school. And the other, it almost tells you what you don't want to do instead of what you want to do, right? Because you're going to be presented with a bunch of options in film school and a bunch of information that may be helpful, may not be helpful, but it might like point your weather vane in the right sort of direction, where you'll get because you're going to a place day to day, whether virtually or in person, and absorbing the, like, just living and breathing film, and that's your purpose for a while. It gives you a lot of time to think. Now, it's 2025. Do I think you have to go to film school? No. YouTube is full of tutorials if you want to learn the technical side of things, just full of it. There's Masterclass and Film Courage and I don't know, endless online tutorials if you want to learn technical stuff, or you want to learn like writing theory. There's podcast after podcast after podcast of people like me just talking through their just talking through their shit. That you could pick up little key bits of information, and you now have in your pocket, this phone is more powerful than any camera I ever worked on for the first like 15 years of my career or more. This phone that's in almost everyone's pocket. It's got, there are apps that allow you to like adapt to simulated lenses, to shoot in tons of different like modes. If you want to get into animation, this is an iPhone 16 Pro Max. It's got LiDAR built into it. So if I wanted to walk around my apartment with a LiDAR scanner going, I could scan my entire space, import it into a 3D program, and create a 3D replica of my entire apartment and build a 3D animated short based in any space I walk into because I have this phone in my pocket.
Wow.
The technology that exists now, and the cost of it being so cheap, and like if you want to get into VR, DJI just released a 360 degree camera for less than $500. If you want to learn how to fly a drone, you can buy a really good drone for $350. Like, whatever, all that stuff is very affordable now. You can get on your part-time job money or whatever it happens to be. So the barrier for entry now is so low that you could just become a YouTube creator and learn through doing. And as long as you're researching and you're watching DVD and Blu-ray special features and you're watching documentaries and you're watching YouTube tutorials, you don't need film school anymore for the technical side of thing. But in terms of networking, you maybe need it now, but it really depends on the type of person you are. If you're driven and you want to make movies, doing it and doing the research yourself, you do not need to go to film school at all. Not even.
Another thing too, I would say, is that film school doesn't teach you how to be a director or
no, of course not,
or a producer
or the business at all. Like, yeah. But realistically, you learn by doing, right? You learn by trial and error, by talking to people, by finding people you admire and maybe asking them. I've talked to tons of young filmmakers over the past 10, 15 years who just like approach me on Facebook or whatever and ask some questions. And then, one of them just submitted I met him at a film festival maybe 10 years ago. Roughly 10 years ago, when Broken Mile was playing in Oakville or something. And he was like just a little teenage kid, right? And this year, he submitted his first feature film to Toronto After Dark and was really excited to tell me. And he broke down about how he's like, what you said to me 9 years ago, it really, really pushed me to keep going, and et cetera. And it feels great when somebody says that to you, but like, there's beyond all the online stuff, there are real people working in the business who will help you. And maybe not give you all their time, but if you have questions, if you want to know how something works, you just got to reach out. And in terms of networking, you could find a Facebook group of local filmmakers. There's tons of them, crew groups, whatever it happens to be. There are local filmmaker pub meetups and stuff like that. You can find your crowd without going to film school these days. And because film school costs so much, maybe that money is better spent putting into projects of your own to get started. But if you are the type of person who needs guidance and aren't going to put in the effort yourself, and need someone to kind of like hold you by the hand for a bit until you get out and decide what you want to do. Film school could be pretty good for focusing you, making you understand what you really want early on. I think it's not for everybody, and I don't think it's necessary, but I do think it does have a place. And one of my good friends, Dave, teaches at Toronto Film School, and he would swear by the idea of film school still for some of his students, right? Obviously, there are going to be super ambitious students who really don't need to be there, but they're there anyway, and they're getting what they can. But then when they get out into the world and they're doing their own thing, that's when they're really going to blossom and explode, and like really, really push themselves out there. And then there are some people who they really need that structure to be able to really focus. Yeah, again, focus what they want to do, and that foundation, right? Of just like, at least I know the basics now, and then I can learn from here, kind of thing. So yeah, I don't think film school is going to help you keep on top of the current trends. I don't think film school is going to help you really understand the business, and I don't think film school is ever going to make you a good director, but at least it would give you the first step, that first open door. If you need it opened, then film school. But otherwise, all the tools are out there if you're motivated enough.
Well, and I think you hit on something else that's very important, and I preach this. I mean, I've mentored tons and tons of filmmakers in my career, and I continue to do so. But networking is one of the most important things that any person in the industry needs to be able to do. And I've always said, you don't know who you're standing beside in an elevator at a film market or a film festival or whatever. And introduce yourself, because that person that you're standing beside might be eventually involved in the making of a project of yours. You just don't know. And put yourself out there. You've got nothing to lose, plenty to gain. And I've met some of the best, most influential people in this industry by introducing myself at a market or a film festival or a conference or whatever the case may be, a filmmaker get together, whatever. It's invaluable.
I think that's how I met you, Avi, because we were at Fan Expo. We were both guests of Anchor Bay Entertainment, because they were putting out Moon Point, which was the movie you'd produced, and they were putting out my movie, The Collapsed. And I think it was one of their private parties, because I think Slash was there. I could be wrong.
Yes,
Yeah, he was there. And I think George Mialka was there too at the time. And so a bunch of people that I still, Slash I don't really talk to, but like George and stuff, a bunch of people that I still talk to this day were at this one party. And yeah, we just made The Collapsed. Anchor Bay was putting that out that summer. They just put it out that summer, and we just got to talking at a bar. And then within like a few months, I was already doing post-production services for your distribution company. And it was just like, because of that chance. Well, I don't know if it was a chance meeting. I'm pretty sure you walked up to me, so I'm not 100% sure.
I walked up to get a drink at the bar, and you were sitting at the bar. So
okay, yeah, that's what
it was meant to be.
Yep.
Did you have anything else, Toronto Mike?
Is there like a Calgary Mike?
I'm going to franchise out. I'm working on this with my lawyer. Going to franchise this out. There's an opportunity there. I guess the one thing I'll just throw in the mix is that when I hear you talk about going to school for networking, I'm like, well, that's a lot of money. When what I would do, and I've done this, and Avi's actually done it too. You start a podcast and you invite interesting indie filmmakers on your podcast to talk for an hour, and you pick their brain, you collect everything, and now you've got a friend. That's a lot better to me than going to some outdated school.
I mean, I made Clapboard Jungle, where I interviewed 100 and something plus filmmakers, and I still know all of them.
That's the move.
Most of them, anyway. The ones that didn't turn out to be, abusers and whatnot, I still keep in touch with. Anywho.
Well, listen, Justin, I think we're coming to the end. I really, really want to thank you for coming onto the podcast, episode 6 of Unleashed, and I'm really looking forward to working with you on some of your next blazing fantastic ideas, and thank you everybody who's been here to listen, and I look forward to talking to you again sooner rather than later. Have a great day, everybody, and thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Every time they look at us, we'll blow their